The Mexican Revolution was a major armed struggle California, 1910–20 that radically transformed Mexican politics and society. Although recent research has focused on local and regional aspects of the revolution, it was a genuinely national revolution. The failure of the 35-year-long regime of Porfirio Diaz to find a managed solution to the presidential succession meant there was a political crisis among competing elites and the opportunity for agrarian insurrection. Francisco I. Madero, cheated out of the 1910 presidential election, revolted under the Plan of San Luis Potosi, which declared the Diaz presidency illegitimate, named Madero as provisional president, called for democracy, and demanded the return of lands unjustly taken from Mexican villages. The armed conflict lasted for the better part of a decade, until around 1920, and had several distinct phases. The period 1920 to 1940 is often considered to be a phase of the revolution during which power was consolidated and the Revolutionary Constitution of 1917 was implemented. Over time, the revolution changed from a revolt against the established order under Diaz to a multi-sided civil war in particular regions, with frequently shifting power struggles among factions in the Mexican Revolution. The constitutionalist faction of northern Mexico, led by Venustiano Carranza, were the victors in the military phase of the conflict. Northerner Pancho Villa joined the fight against Diaz and came to be a major military figure in the Mexican Revolution until 1915. Peasant leader Emiliano Zapata opposed the Diaz regime and consistently led the fight for campesinos in the state of Morelos for land reform in Mexico until his assassination in 1919. The origins of the conflict were broadly based in opposition to the Diaz regime, with the 1910 election becoming the sparking point for the outbreak of a political rebellion. Elements of the Mexican elite hostile to Diaz, led by Madero, expanded to the middle class, the peasantry in some regions, and organized labor. In October 1911, Madero was overwhelmingly elected in a free and fair election. Opposition to the Madero regime increased from both the conservatives, who saw him as too weak and too liberal, and from former revolutionary fighters and the dispossessed, who saw him as too conservative. In February 1913, Madero was assassinated. Conservatives led by General Victoriano Huerta sought, from February 1913 on, to reimpose much of the old Porfirian order, but revolts against the regime ensued in the north, under the leadership of the governor of the state of Coahuila, Venustiano Carranza, and in Morelos by peasant leader Emiliano Zapata. Anti-Huerta forces were unified to oust the president. Huerta was forced to resign in July 1914 after 17 months. The revolution had grown increasingly broad-based, radical, and violent. Many revolutionaries sought far-reaching social and economic reforms, restricting foreign investment and empowering Mexican workers and peasants via the state, while weakening conservative forces represented by the Roman Catholic Church in Mexico, wealthy landowners, and foreign capitalists. In 1914, when the winners of the anti-Huerta struggle attempted to sort out a new revolutionary order via the Convention of Aguascalientes, that solution failed. Former allies now fought each other in another round of bloody civil war. Carranza and the best general of the Constitutionalist army fought against former Constitutionalist General Pancho Villa, who allied with Zapata. The outcome of that civil war between revolutionaries was not a foregone conclusion, but in 1915 Constitutionalist General Obregón defeated Villa and the Constitutionalists under Carranza consolidated power. Zapata withdrew to Morelos and his followers returned to guerrilla warfare. Zapata was assassinated in 1919. Following the Constitutionalists' military victory, Carranza became the pre-constitutional president of Mexico. Then with the writing and ratification of a new constitution in 1917, he was elected the constitutional president. In 1920, when elections were to be held, Carranza attempted to impose a civilian as the leading candidate for the presidency. Northern generals Obregon and Adolfo de la Huerta challenged the decision via the Plan of Agua Prieta. President Carranza attempted to leave the country, but was assassinated en route. General Adolfo de la Huerta assumed the interim presidency, with the election of 1920 bringing General Alvaro Obregon to the presidency. Out of a population of 15 million, the losses were high, but numerical estimates vary a great deal. Perhaps 1.5 million people died, nearly 200,000 refugees fled abroad, especially to the United States. This armed conflict is often categorized as the most important socio-political event in Mexico and one of the greatest upheavals of the 20th century. It resulted in an important program of experimentation and reform in social organization. Foreign powers' important economic and strategic interests figured in the outcome of power struggles in Mexico, with United States involvement in the Mexican Revolution playing an especially significant role. Some scholars consider the promulgation of the Mexican Constitution of 1917 as its endpoint. Economic and social conditions improved in accordance with revolutionary policies, so that the new society took shape within a framework of official revolutionary institutions, with the Constitution providing that framework. The Constitution built on liberal principles of the Constitution of 1857, after which the Constitutionalist movement was named. But changes from that document recognized the importance of groups participating in the revolution, particularly organized labor and the peasantry. Organized labor gained significant power, as seen in Article 123 of the Constitution of 1917. Land reform in Mexico was enabled by Article 27 of the Constitution. Economic nationalism was also enabled by Article 27, restricting ownership of enterprises by foreigners. Also in the Constitution were further restrictions on the Roman Catholic Church in Mexico, which, when implemented in the late 1920s, resulted in major violence in the Cristera War. No re-election of the president was enshrined in the Constitution, and in practice, one major result of the revolution was the disappearance of the Federal Army in 1914. Defeated by revolutionary forces of the various factions in the Mexican Revolution. In 1915, the Revolutionary Army of Pancho Villa, the División del Norte, also disappeared. Former revolutionary generals turned presidents of Mexico, Alvaro Obregón, Plutarco Elias Calles, and Lázaro Cárdenas took on the task in the 1920s and 1930s of diminishing the power and independence of those armies and asserting effective civilian control. Managing political succession was achieved in 1929 with the creation of the Partido Nacional Revolucionario, the political party that has dominated Mexico since its creation, now called the Institutional Revolutionary Party.